Hey guys, what's up? I'm Brandon. I'm a professional author in the manga, novels, and webtoons and video game space. And today I'm going to be reacting blindly to a video called 5 Essential Storytelling Rules I Just Made Up. Okay, well, I'm curious to see what those are, because I guess there are some storytelling rules that are really basic. But for the most part, I don't think that there's any, like, set in stone rules. But we'll see what they have to say. Make sure to subscribe for content that is like this, educational, from the writing side, and drop a like just for the YouTube algorithm. All right, let's react.
I'm getting this point out of the way first because despite having tickled it in other videos, I just couldn't resist. It's too darn important to me.
The properties of people and the properties of character have almost nothing to do with each other.
So here's a curveball. I don't like Sorkin's dialogue style at all. The thing he's most known for, I find, is excessive quipping and...
I don't either. Fun fact. Maybe it's just an age thing? I don't know. Maybe I'm too young.
Annoying and hard.
That's not true.
Yet this quote of his basically opened up my third, fourth, and fifth eyes as a writer, so he must be forgiven. In my Avatar video, I explained why I didn't have a problem with simple characters, because the essence of a character was never to mimic the complexity.
I'm curious on that video because Avatar, the second one, had a lot better storytelling. I thought the first one was pretty mid in terms of storytelling, but artistically amazing.
Of a human being. Characters are apparitions. They are not fully fledged people, and no matter how hard you try to make them so, you will fail. And thank God, because it wouldn't work for shit. The diversity of our lived experience is vast and jumbled. We grow and change, sure, but we don't have perfectly paced 3-act character arcs, and there is just so much happening. Let me show you what I mean.
I agree. So I'll speak to that for a second. He's talking about like how you shouldn't try and make your characters like real people, which I kind of agree with, because if the characters were real people, they would be probably really boring. So when you're writing fiction, you're writing your characters, you want to make it so that the characters are, I don't know, fantastical in some way, some exaggerated version of what you might see in real life, just to make them both entertaining, but also to remove all the things that you wouldn't want to see in a character in fiction. So, personal take. But actually, I've actually seen a lot of professional writers say something very similar, where it's not essential to be realistic in your writing, not just in your characters, but also in your storytelling and dialogue, etc.
Let's say I decide to take my life and look at it through the lens of, pick a theme, loneliness. And so I pick out all the moments in which loneliness is relevant, and I arrange them into a chronological list of scenes divided into 3 acts, and I write a movie about the theme of loneliness, and I win the Oscar. And I'm in the bathroom doing coke with Leo, and he's like, "Hey, local, congrats on the Oscar, but I'm kind of confused." And I'm like, "What for, Leo?" And he's like, "Well, you said this was a movie about your life, but your family was only in it for a few minutes. You skipped over most of your childhood, and the majority of scenes were just you getting rejected by women in boots. That's not a complete picture of you. I'm sorry, man, I just don't get it." And I'm like, "It's okay, Leo. Let me break it down for you." Look, basically, characters are survival kits. If you want to go out into the wilderness of creativity and conquer some grand theme or concept, you can't be hauling around every single one of your possessions. You bring what's necessary, you leave the rest at home. Even those comfy slippers, even that cool little doodad from the pawn shop.
Feed him to the pig.
Maximize your efficiency. I had a mentor in high school who made me cut my scripts in half and then in half again. It annoyed the shit out of me at the time, but it was one of the most important lessons I ever learned about writing. I would think to myself, if I keep cutting off the fluff, I'll never have a full feature film script. I'll just keep it.
I agree with that. I feel like he's kind of saying what I just said. Maybe I spoke too soon.
Ending up with short film, and his voice would appear in my head and remind me that a 20-page script where every character, scene, and line matters is vastly superior to a script that uses extraneous character details and irrelevant subplots to buff out its screen time under the guise of being more three-dimensional. Depth is not good for its own sake. Figure out which parts of your characters' backstories are relevant to the story and burn the rest. And might I add that not only...
I agree with that. I think everything that you do in your story should have a purpose. Whether it's like, hey, this is a character scene, whether it's this character is saying something, this particular line of dialogue, everything should have a purpose, and it should all be in progression of moving the story and the characters forward. I guess you could argue that you could add a scene or add a character or add a interaction where the purpose is to flesh out the world, but if the world doesn't have to be fleshed out, or the character doesn't have to be fleshed out in that particular way, then it's kind of fluff. And as writers, we always cut the fluff. That's key.
Only are characters not real people, their world is not the real world that we live in. When you're trying to figure out if a plot beat in your story works, don't ask yourself, is this plausible or is this realistic? Ask yourself instead, is this right? Does this make sense given what I've established about my world and the characters with whom I've populated it? Is this character's fate derived from random chaos that I as a writer have imposed upon them? Or is it a result of their own choices and the choices of their fellow characters? Oh, hey.
I agree with that super hard. Nice.
What's the
Nice.
fiction community doing here? Probably being weird. Just kidding, I don't have a problem with you guys, but that's not to say I won't pick apart your methods. Respectfully, I know most of you are like 14. Sometimes I get really engrossed in an online community, but I don't make my presence known in any way. I just silently observe it like a caveman investigating a brush fire. At some point I realized that my Instagram Explore page was 99% pastel squares and Tumblr screenshots, all hell-bent on suffocating me with the term OC. Said many an aspiring writer, everyone meet my character. Here is a complete description of their personality, their icks, their quirks, their hobbies, their likes.
They're 15. This looks like a freaking alien. What is that? They're a Taurus, but they can also firebend. And they're a fairy magic person. Maybe they can ice skate too. Are these sneakers or ice skating? I don't know. They're the chosen one.
But you want to know how they fit into the greater thematic whole of the story?
Yes.
Oh. Well, the thing about that... Obviously, I know some people just like to design characters and furnish them with traits and not thrust them into a greater story. That's fine. But many do, and I think the online writing community has failed to push those people in the right direction. The discourse they're forced to participate in is basically, oh my god, I'm doing enemies to lovers. Here's a list of 9,000 underused character tropes.
I know these characters
And I'm
so
like,
well.
Whoa! Do you know what your story is about? Give me a log line. What do you mean you haven't thought of a plot yet? What exactly do you think a plot is? A pinball machine you can drop your fully formed characters into? Look at me. Look into my weary writer eyes. Do you want to make cool shit? You certainly don't have to want that, but if you do...
Okay, this is a little aggressive. I don't know why he's being so aggressive. Particularly because I think some of the people he's talking to are like fan fiction writers who, a lot of them are not writing to build off a plot or even create a plot that's interesting. It's mostly to fulfill their own personal fantasies of what they wish was explored in that story. So this is pretty interesting that he's like pointing the gun or the writer and they're like, give me a log line. It's like, if I was writing fan fiction, which I used to, I think a lot of writers started off in fan fiction. I would not have a log line because that's not what I thought about. Maybe internally I was like, what if like Draco and Hermione like had sex? That's probably like the log line, but that's probably not what I was thinking of when you start the fan fiction. I'm curious why he's doing that, but okay.
If you want to engineer the next hit series, it's my opinion that you need to completely reevaluate the relationship between your characters and your plot. So here's my writing process. If it doesn't work for you, that's cool. There are many ways to arrive at one's destination, and speaking from experience, the last thing I want anybody to do is take a stranger's writing advice as divine law, but I'm going to share it on the off chance that you've been looking for a fresh perspective. So step 1. What is your story about? A premise, a situation, call it what you will. In one sentence, what are you writing about? Figure that out, and then you move into step 2. What characters naturally belong in this situation?
Okay. I would say that's about right. I don't know. Sometimes I don't think about all the characters first. I think about the premise. So I go, personally, this is his process. This is my process. I go logline, which is where I recommend everyone starts. I think people start way too big usually. So he's right about that. Start off with your logline. What's this thing going to be about in 1 to 2 sentences? This entire thing, everything. What's the concept, and make it unique. And if you can sell the logline, then you're doing great. But then usually I think about the main character and then what is the concept within one paragraph? Like write one paragraph of the overall concept, like flesh out that logline into a concept. Then I think about what characters go into it, because usually the concept and what's happening in this world helps me informs me of what characters could also exist. Maybe he's working backwards. I'm curious of his process. But I think that process works really well for me, so I recommend trying it if this process that he's talking about doesn't work for you.
I like to take all the possible perspectives one could have on the situation and boil each opinion down to a single character. And step 3, Define their relationships. It's surprisingly easy. If you have 7 characters, they might have varying degrees of trust in one another. Which characters would become friends given their perspectives? Which ones would become enemies? Wait, enemies, that's conflict. Now you have step 4, plot. You have 7 characters, each with a unique angle on the situation. That situation could be anything from a broken home to an alien war, but it doesn't matter because whatever it is, your characters were custom made for it because you decided on the premise first. Around this time, you might find the protagonist emerging, and you might not. It's okay to not have a clear-cut protagonist. All that matters is that you have relevant characters with relevant perspectives, and since they themselves are so invested in the story, they're going to start making decisions. Look at them go, they're factioning up, they're backstabbing. Wow, those two are... You'll notice that I have not mentioned my characters' personalities yet. That's because I think personalities usually develop as a result of the core motivations. Think about your personality. Think about what excites you, what worries you. Is that just decoration? No, it's tied to your soul. It's tied to your core motivation in life. And you already got core motivations worked out in step 2, baby. So at least in my experience, personality kind of just happens. But bottom line, if I fully develop a character and get attached before I even know how that character slots into the bigger picture, it throws my writing process into complete chaos. So take what you will from all that.
That's an interesting process. I think that's fine. I mean, everyone writes, differently, so I think that's fine. I think a lot of what I do personally is, like, I do the characters, like, after I have, like, the plot down. I think characters are the most important part of any sort of story. Characters are more important than plot. They're more important than the world. They're more important than anything. I don't know. I think he and I flipped different things. I think he figures out the characters first, and then how they interact with each other, and then starts to build the story out from there based on their interactions. Whereas I create a concept and then have some characters, and then honestly I kind of wing it. I'm not gonna lie. Like, sometimes I was writing a season beat for Webtoon Original, which is coming out soon, and basically season beats are what's going to happen in the entire season, every single episode, what's going to happen. And I was just creating characters and creating, like, those character relationships and those webs as I was going. So I don't know. I don't think you'll have to have the characters, like, fleshed out or even defined that early in the stage. Maybe the main cast. The main cast is sometimes nice to have. But even me, sometimes I add, like, a new main character, like, really late in the game. So do what works for you guys.
This one is even more me-specific than the last one. It's a principle I've stood by through thick and thin, and I don't expect many people to agree with it, but here it is anyway. The horror genre is unique because it's almost always gauged by how the viewer feels. It's a visceral type of entertainment. I go into a horror movie wanting to feel the neurochemical sensation of fear. I pay for that experience, and I gauge how worthwhile it was based on how strong my physical and emotional response was. And that logic can be applied all across the board. Drama, did it make me cry? Action, was I on the edge of my seat? By all means, chase that feeling of immersion. Let your feelings be your guiding light, so long as you don't go throwing around the O word. What concerns me, though, is writing advice to the tune of how to make the audience cry. It strikes me as kind of manipulative. I just don't like when people talk about art that way. I can't really put my finger on why, but even stuff like make your character more relatable so people care just feels really backwards to me.
That's so interesting. It looks like a Tumblr post. I don't think I would take writing advice from Tumblr, because you don't know who's even, like, posting that. Who are they to give writing advice? I don't know. It's tough to give writing advice because I think everything, including the advice I give you guys, should be taken with a grain of salt. And the advice that this guy gives as well. Everything should be taken with a grain of salt, because ultimately what we're doing as writers is creating art, and art is all subjective. So what might work for one person might not work for you. And it might work for you, and that's why you should take all the advice and try things and try what works. But at the end of the day, like, I think no one can really teach you how to write past a certain level, past the beginner level, right? Past, like, the very basics of writing. Intermediate and advanced is all you trying a bunch of things and trying to discover what works for you, I think.
I found so much more catharsis in focusing on the characters' emotions, letting them go on their journeys and not worrying about the audience's expectations. I can't let a force from beyond the fourth wall influence my story. It would almost feel like corruption. But at the same time, I want my art to be loved. And if it weren't for my favorite stories moving me so deeply, I'd have no motivation to write at all. So there's that. I think one of the hallmarks of an insecure writer is their reluctance to let the dialogue do any work. A lot of viewers and writers draw a line between talking and doing, because obviously they're different. One involves saying things with your mouth whole, the other one involves big action set pieces, duh. But really, do you know what a legal trial is? It's a bunch of humans standing in a room together saying words, and depending on what words are said, the fate of another human is decided. Sometimes that human is locked in a cage forever, sometimes that human is killed, but communication is so much more than an abstract plane we use to manage physical events. It's transformative. Through the act of speaking, we can achieve personal progress. A conversation can be an emotional journey on the other side of which both parties emerge different. Language is the most advanced tool we have at our disposal, and its breadth as a medium of expression is unparalleled. If a character is happy, there are near infinite ways they could express their happiness. Their word choice and delivery, their self-perception, their perception of others all tell us specifics about them. And if any line in your script could be said by any character, well, then you're probably not using the medium of verbal communication as effectively as you could be. A conversation can be the climax of a story. A single word can hold immense narrative weight in the right context, not to mention fully fleshed out stories that consist solely of people talking in rooms. Yeah, welcome to narrative, there's a lot of that. And this brings me back to number 3. You can't deprive your audience of necessary conversations because you're worried too much talking would bore them. It certainly might, but that's their problem, not yours. If two characters are in a room together, give them a meaningful interaction. And if you can't think of anything they might say, you might want to reevaluate your cast and how well they serve the theme. You can use dialogue as a litmus test to see how necessary a character really is, and you can use it to define existing physical events in the story and give them additional context. Show Don't Tell is for 5th grade book reports. I am tired of being told by writing gurus that dialogue should only be used when absolutely necessary. And don't sleep on the raw societal...
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with all of this. I think dialogue is a really powerful tool that sometimes people underuse, particularly in my medium, which is like manga and webtoons. It's like mostly like a lot of people speak with actions in manga and webtoons. Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree, but sometimes I'm like, I think he said something about like, don't worry about if the reader, what was it? It was like dialogue. Sometimes you can't have too much dialogue. It was like he was saying like, don't worry if the reader is going to get bored by you having too much dialogue. I think that still matters. I think you should still be wary about how the reader is going to perceive a scene, because there's a reason that they perceive the scene that way, right? If there's too much dialogue going on, it kind of conflicts with what he said earlier about conciseness and cutting out the fluff. I still think that dialogue should still have a purpose. And so if it doesn't have a purpose, then you should just chop it. But yeah, I mean, I think if it has a purpose, like you said, on like how it can hold immense weight, I think that's fine.
Power words can have either. At the ancient site of Opus, the army of Alexander the Great turned on him, and he won them all back with tears in their eyes by climbing onto a rock and saying the perfect combination of words. Words have shaped the course of history. Words have seated themselves so deeply in the collective consciousness of the human race that we proclaim them to be the commandments of God. So, do me a favor and think long and hard before you tell a writer that their script is too wordy. Maybe it's you. Anyways. Earlier I mentioned that once you get your characters...
Maybe it's you. I think I kind of disagree with that. I think a script can be, more often than not, scripts are too wordy. Just because for beginner to intermediate, like people are using so much exposition, people are using so much fluff. I think more oftentimes than not, it's too wordy. Personal take.
Situated, they might just start going at it, and they might start doing things that you didn't have in mind when you initially conceived your story idea. There may be an urge to try and reach into the story to correct their courses back to the way you want it. Maybe a character you quite liked has become much darker and more unhealthy than you.
Oh, this is Arcane. My mentor actually helped to create this show. Awesome.
Imagine. Maybe even a protagonist. It's your story, of course. You can choose to strike your characters down with bolts of lightning or nudge them along in whatever way you see fit. But just this once, humor me and do none of that. Sit back with a cocktail, hands 100% off, and see what paths your characters take. You might find that without your protection, one dies much sooner than expected. You might find that a side character, now free from your hierarchy of importance, grows into a prominent main player and steals the show. I've seen all of these things happen, and I genuinely believe that stories do write themselves sometimes. Oh, but don't literally type anything yet. Yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention that. All this is the outline phase. Sticky notes. Hundreds of sticky notes. Make a timeline. Keep things moving until that organic story emerges. Then crystallize it into a draft. I don't believe in write drunk, edit sober. Put some actual thought into it. Get it right. Your first draft doesn't need to be depressing sludge, and writing is so much more than scripting. Don't put yourself down for not pumping out page after page after page. That time will come. And finally opening up that blank document with a clear head and a plan is, to me, incalculably more satisfying than endlessly drafting and redrafting until you go insane. So,
I kind of agree, but I kind of disagree. I agree with the fact that you don't want to be endlessly drafting, but I do disagree with the fact that you have to put so much pressure onto the first draft. I know he's saying that he's not saying you're putting pressure on it, but he's saying put more time, put more thought into your first draft, etc., etc. Arguably, I think your first draft can be absolutely garbage, and you can make it all work out in the editing phase, which that's what I've done. I've written entire novels where the first draft is absolute garbage and it just transformed in the editing phase. The best way to avoid having to rewrite your draft is to have a planner, like story beats on what's going to happen, so that you can address all the little things that happen and rework anything before you even start writing their first drafts. But if, there's different types of writers, which I talk about in my writing class. But there's different types of writers. You can be a planner, you can be a person who just wings it, or you can be a hybrid of those two. I don't know. The whole thing about writing drunk, edit sober, it's not about being drunk and being intoxicated. It's about putting down the ideas that you want to put down and not worrying too much about like how perfect it is, and then editing it sober, editing it with a clear mind of trying to make it as good as it can be, and getting it to that final stage. So I don't know. Basically, what I'm just trying to say, don't put too much pressure on your first draft. Don't put any pressure on your first draft. It's just the first draft. Like, who cares?
that's my piece. That's all 5 of my things. I trust that you can tell when I'm being hyperbolic, but I do sincerely hope that you gain something of value from my rants, or at least enjoyed them. And then Leo's like, listen, man, I'm just an actor. Wait, no, stop. I have to say a thing.
Oh.
I did not think the Avatar video would pop off in the way that it did.
Okay, now I want to watch the Avatar video. Anyway, guys, that's that seems to be the video. I agree with a lot of his points. I disagree with some, but it's okay. I think it's his process, his opinion. There's no right or wrong answer. My opinion most likely is not the right answer as well. So, but yeah. Cool video. I'll leave the link to the full video in the description. Yeah, drop a like, drop a subscribe, and comment the next video that you think I should react to. Thank you guys so much for watching, and peace.